What's up guys, welcome back. Today we're going to be kicking off a brand new Let's Play, and today we're going to be delving into the world of Wolverine Studios Pro Basketball 17. So for those of you who may not have played this game before, it's essentially the same sort of thing to a typical football manager game or an out of the park baseball, but in this time it's delving into the world of the professional basketball. In particular, today we're going to be looking at the world of the NBA. So what team we're going to pick? As you may guess on the screen, I've decided to pick the LA Waves, or as they're known in the real world, the LA Lakers. The reason being is that, as we may well know, anyone who follows professional basketball, the LA Lakers have not had the best of times over the past few years, with Kobe Bryant retiring and declining, and the loss of sort of the big three that they've had, and Paul Gasol obviously getting older, and sort of they're going through a bit of a transition period at the moment in real life. And as everyone knows, all the sort of turmoil with Magic Johnson taking the roles as the general manager over there. So I thought, why not? That's a good opportunity for us to see whether we can do a better job. So whether we can bring the Lakers back into as a championship contender over the few years, and potentially see how we get on. So if we kick off here, just looking at the team information, for those of you who follow the NBA, will be very familiar with some of these stats that are here. As everyone knows, the LA Lakers play in Los Angeles, or the LA Waves I should say, with this game. In terms of the team awards and the retired shirts, there's a few retired numbers. I'll just cycle through them now. And they've obviously won several championships. I mean, this thing will go on for ages here. But obviously they haven't won a championship in a little while now. And we're going to see whether we can bring them back to former glory. So if we take a look at straight away into our actual coach here and general manager that we've created. I've gone with what the game is called MVP settings, so hardest difficulty. So just to make it a real challenge to see whether we can do this. So you can see here on the right hand side, my actual skills as general manager are generally quite low. You can start off with a lot higher and higher potential, but I've gone with low settings to make this a real challenge in Let's Play. The other sort of things you'll have on here is obviously what's interesting about this game is that you can also just be a head coach and just take over the reins and not have any control over personnel or players signing and trading. But I felt for this Let's Play, we'll go with a general manager who also has the ability to set some of the rotation up and essentially use a dummy coach as such. So if you look down the bottom of the screen, you can see there's different philosophies. For those of you who are following my DDS college basketball Let's Play series, you'll be familiar with some of this stuff, but this is all editable as you go along, and these changes do have an impact on the sort of style of basketball that your team will play. So if you, for example, offensive pace, we can set it so it's really fast, so there's not as many sort of slow build up possessions, but more looking for quick shots, looking at things like how we operate on the boards on offense and defense, what sort of preference we have for players and how often we rotate, and then looking at sort of defensive strategy, so how much zone defense we play, customizing that based on the opposition that we may play, how much we're going to use a sort of full court defense, and how sort of tenacious we're going to be on defense itself, whether we're going to cause a lot more fouls but be a bit more aggressive, or whether we're going to sag off and essentially let the opposition do whatever they want. So that's how we've set up the general manager. If you look at some of the other things that we will have on this home screen here, but we'll delve more into these as we go along with the season. But we've got things like emails. This is just some initial welcome emails that we get at the beginning of the game. You'll see that I've already set up and gone through the D-League draft. I didn't want to take you guys through the pain of that. There's nothing of interest there. It's just essentially a draft for the D-League. I've set up the actual draft for the next season as well. So we've set that up as just a default setting. And what's interesting about this game is that you can link this game with the latest version of the college basketball game and essentially play a full fantasy league, bringing players through from college and right up the professional ranks and seeing how they progress, which is a real fascinating insight and something that I haven't seen in any other sort of American professional sports game, the ability to take a college team and players and essentially develop them and bring them right way through to your actual professional game and play through them there. So that's a real interesting twist. But for this playthrough, I've just gone with the default settings, so it will be completely random and made up players for the draft. So it'll be interesting to see how they turn out. You also have things like the phone conversations, and we'll touch on those a lot later on in the season. Similar to any other sort of Wolverine Studios game that you may have come across, the player personalities do play a real interesting twist in the game. So we'll have to obviously manage that here and manage discussions with players. We've got other things like the rankings and transactions awards and injuries and media and etc. And we'll see how that plays in over the next few plays through, really. This is all sort of just the basic stuff at the beginning, so there's not a great deal to really comment on here because not a lot has happened yet. So if we dive straight into the staff, so some of this will maybe be familiar with you guys in terms of the real life names. So obviously our head coach at the moment is Luke Walton. He looks like he's got some really quite solid stats for a coach, so pretty happy with him as well. He's got a long-term contract as well, so we'll see how he plays out. He hopefully could be quite beneficial in terms of developing players as those are familiar with the LA Waves in real life. It's very much going through a bit of a rebuilding and retooling phase of the franchise, so we want a good coach in here who will be able to develop our players to reach their potential. If we look across the board at the other assistants, not a great deal to shout about for those guys. They're pretty mediocre in terms of their stats, but the names will obviously be very familiar with you, so we may look to see whether we can bring in some better personnel maybe through the season or next off-season. Another unique twist that we have with this new pro basketball game is you'll see up here there's also these scout staff points. So each team and each franchise in the game will have a certain number of staff points to assign scouts to. So this is primarily focused on just the next upcoming draft. And essentially what you can do is you can assign different number of points to different regions of America, or looking at the international scene, looking where you want to focus on. And the idea of this is that obviously in real life, NBA franchises will have an extensive scouting network across the world now, with global being a global brand and being a league where lots of professional players will want to join. So this just kind of sort of gives you that feel for it. So essentially the way this works is you put a certain number of points in a particular region and you get a certain type of quality of scouting. So as you can see up here, it sort of details it. If we put 25 points in, we get just a basic scouting report. So we'll get some sort of summaries through emails and some basic understanding about particular players in that region. And we can look at sort of upgrading that in terms of points and just getting certain playing styles as well as the scouting reports. So we'll understand a little bit more about that when we touch on our players, but each player has a certain type of style they'll play in, certain type of shot preference, etc. And that plays a key role when you're looking at things like strategies, that I'll touch on later. And then finally, we can also put in some additional points into particular regions and get more detailed emails on the particular players in that region. So I'm not going to sign this for this first Let's Play. I'll kind of open that up to you guys. I mean, we've got 284 points, I believe, if we go back and have a look. So it'd be interesting to see what you guys think. Do we just basically focus on America, knowing that sort of our main batch of draftees are going to come from the States, or do we sort of head out and just take some different regions across the world and see whether we can find that hidden gem that may be out in the international scene that some of the other franchises might not have noticed. So cracking on, having a look at the roster, obviously this is the main important thing. This is where we're going to sort of sink or swim as a franchise, is looking at the personnel we've got. If we sort of have a quick sort of scan through at the players, so the way the Wolverine Studios lays out their personnel and their sort of player attributes is very similar to how you see any other type of general management sim, in that you have player ratings, You can choose to have these on a scale of 1 to 10 or 1 to 100. I always go to the 1 to 100 because I like the greater detail that you tend to get with a wider stat range. But it's similar sorts of things. So focusing on things like scoring, passing, shooting, handling, rebounding, defensive abilities, and general discipline and sort of intelligence on the court. So that's gives you a general makeup of a player, and it sort of feeds into these sort of ball ratings here. 5 obviously being a top player, and sort of I'd tend to say 2.5 is an average player, average sort of NBA player really in this game. You'll see below that there's also the relationships. So as I touched on earlier, these will either sort of go up or stay or go down throughout the season, depending on what sort of interaction we have with the particular player, how he sort of feels about the coach, whether he's getting enough playing time, or whether he's fighting with other players within the locker. So we'll have to manage that carefully as we go through the seasons, because obviously to have a chance at winning a championship as we build this franchise back up, and we want to have some of the best players, but obviously they've got to work in harmony together to be truly effective. So if we look at the player profile as well, as I sort of touched on, the sort of the relationships also sort of are impacted by this player profile. So for example, how loyal they are, their motivation, how determined they are to play for a winner, their work ethic and personality obviously is a big factor for that, and how much demand they have for playing time. So what's interesting here is you can see sort of D'Angelo Russell, one of our draftees a couple of years ago, for Lakers fans who remember him. He doesn't have a huge demand for playing time, which is interesting considering he was a second pick a few years ago. So it'd be interesting with that to see whether he would be happy to sort of take a backseat sort of rotation role, to see whether that would be effective for him if we do get someone better in. And then sort of on the right hand side we have our contract information. So as for those of you who are familiar with American sports, the teams operate under salary cap rules, in that they'll have certain amount of money that they can use to essentially sign players or operate in within that year. So we can see D'Angelo Russell here's got a 2-year deal with us. Because he was a rookie a couple of years ago, he's option eligible, so we can extend that out and keep him here for, I think, for another year or so. So this will all play a factor. We'll obviously want to operate within the remits of the salary cap that we have. And then sort of down the bottom here we have the details on the sort of the floor range and ball actions in terms of their style on the court really. So as I said, the strategy that we'll use for the Lakers or the Waves here will be determined a lot by what types of players we have and what their preferences are. You can work on this with phone conversations with them and encouraging them to take up different types of shots based on where we feel they're going to be most effective. So we may want to work on that throughout the season, but it gives you a good idea of how this player operates. So we can see in D'Angelo Russell's preferences, he's very much pass first point guard. He doesn't tend to sort of want to take that many shots, and he seems to tend to operate sort of generally in sort of the mid-range, above break sort of range. He's not particularly a great fan of the corner or of posting up too much. So be interested to see how he's sort of shooting and how he's whether he is taking enough shots to really be effective, because he's got quite a good scoring and sort of good shooting ability anyway. And then sort of in the middle here we have sort of details on transactions. So as players get traded, we'll be able to see a nice little log of where they've been traded, and what's interesting about this game is what they've been traded for as well. So that'll be really interesting as we build up a history through this Let's Play. And then we have the awards. So if they win All-Star recommendations, they go to a member of the rookie teams. If they're in any sort of win any sort of monthly awards, MVP awards, the usual sort of things that you associate with any American sport, they'll be displayed here. And then we get a summary of the scouting reports. This is generally just a summary of generally of this and this combined. So it gives you a bit of an overview. I tend not to read this too much and tend to just look at the stats. That's why I tend to find it's easier to understand about a particular player. As we sort of flick through the player, what's great and what's unique about this game in particular is, whilst you get the stats, and there are so many stats in this game, from team to player, anyone who's an analytics enthusiast will love this game for that. You could spend hours delving into it. But you also do get this unique shot chart, and I haven't seen this in any other type of sort of basketball management game. In that, as we sort of go through the games and we play, we can have a look and see where he really is being effective, and see whether his floor range and his ball actions are really he's really making the best of his actual ability. So that'll be really fascinating to see. And then we also have things like game logs and staff reports. These are generally just summaries from the scale of A to F on where we think his ability is at the moment. So that's a quick summary of the player card. Let's take a look at the actual personnel we've got. So as I touched on, D'Angelo Russell's probably our starting point guard. He's got some pretty solid handling and passing skills. He's got some great shots, and he's got a good court intelligence. So hopefully he'll be able to sort of secure the ball for us this season. In terms of personnel, it'll be interesting to see how he does. Whether we do get someone else in and look to move on. But at the age of 19, he's got some potential left, as you can see by this right hand side column as well. He has sort of some good potential, so we'll see how that plays out. Other point guards we've got Jose Calderon, which generally just looks like he's in there just for a contract year really. Whether we keep him at the end of the next year, we'll see, or whether we look to move him on. But he's got some great ball handling skills. He's not a particularly great defender, but he can look after the ball for us. He's got court intelligence, and like I said, his passing ball hand is pretty solid. Whether we look at this, his ball actions, he generally passes the ball 89% of the time. So he definitely is a pass first point guard. But he's got an interesting sort of 1 year contract that we might want to utilise in trade discussions. Marcelo Huertas, I believe that says. Again, similar to thing, I guess it's a similar thing to our other international player, Jose Calderon, in that he is definitely a pass first point guard. Not an okay defender actually. Not a great. Doesn't like to have the ball on his own to score. You see his scoring rating is very low. But he's on a pretty cheap deal, and at the age of 32, he's not going to develop. So he probably will be a bench player for us, but. We're not going to lose too much sleep over the fact we're not paying him a great deal. We've got Jordan Clarkson, who's probably our starting shooting guard, I would imagine. He's got some pretty solid stats across the board. I'd say he's a bit of a mixed bag in terms of it. It seems like he has quite a lot of everything, but doesn't stand out in anything in particular. He's on quite a long deal as well. That's quite an expensive deal. Looks like we've got a bit of a down year next year, and then he's back up again, so that's an odd contract. We'll see how he does. He looks okay. Doesn't really stand out. He's got some potential left, as we can see here. We'll see how he gets on. See whether he is good enough for us to develop him. We then have Lou Williams. So for those of you familiar in real life, he's now at the Houston Rockets. But he did have a great year this year, actually. He was playing some really great basketball, for those who follow the NBA. He looks on here, he's got some great defensive ability, so you can see he can make a play or two on defence. Looks like he's not the best passer, but we don't need him to pass too much. And he's got some good shooting ability. He's got a nice mixed bag in terms of his floor range, so that could be interesting. Probably a good six man in terms of coming in and making an impact. So we'll see how he does. We'll probably put him as a six man, I think. Look at Nick Young. He's not looking great, is he? Looks like he's got some terrible passing stats for a guard. Not a great defender. Looks like he's got some great court intelligence though. I can't see him getting too much playing time. Interestingly, he's got a player option next year for quite a decent amount. So whether he'll more than likely try to take that. So whether we look to ship him out this year to try and free up some of that cap space, we'll see. And then we sort of turn to our latest rookie, Brandon Ingram, who was picked second last year. Probably the best player we have on the roster, I would say, in terms of he's got some good potential. He's currently looks like a fairly good player. Again, he's got some good stats across the board. Looks like an excellent shooter. Looks like he's okay on defence. Not a great rebounder, but that's not too disastrous. So we'll see how he goes. I'll be very interested to see how he performs this year. He's getting interesting. He hasn't got a great demand for playing time either. So maybe there's something with the rookies that are coming through now. They're not too worried about their playing time. They just want to earn their money. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, I expect big things from him this year. He's probably going to be one of them that we'll want to keep for quite a long time. As you know, $5 million for this sort of player is excellent, and he's got obviously those rookie options we can exercise. Looking at our next player, Meta World Peace. For those of you who are familiar with Ron Artest, who's his new name, he's obviously at the very twilight of his career. Summarised by his statistics here, his player ratings are pretty awful. Still has a bit of defence left in him, but I can't see him getting too much playing time from us. He's definitely here just for a bit of a locker room presence, a bit of veteran experience, I think. Not on a small deal really, not on a long term contract or anything. So, be interesting to see whether he can keep sort of players sort of together. He does have a very good personality, which is interesting. And for those of you familiar with Meta World Peace's career, that's definitely an interesting one. Next up, we have Julius Randle, who's another one of our younger guys. Looks like he's a really good rebounder, which is great to see for someone in sort of the front forward positions. He's got some decent stats. His defensive ability is fairly low, so maybe he might be pushed around a bit on the block. He's not the tallest in there, so we'll see how that goes. He's got 2 years left with us on a small contract, really, $3 and $4 million. So we'll see how he goes. He may be a good trade piece, actually, thinking about it, because he probably will get some good stats in the rebounding numbers that we could probably move on. Next up we have is Larry Nance Jr. And probably my favourite LA Lakers player in real life. I think he's an excellent player. He's very underrated. On here his stats look pretty average. He looks like he's predominantly going to work. Yeah, he's predominantly going to work in the post. He's got a bit of a mid-range game, but he's got no outside game whatsoever by the looks of it. Doesn't like to go and stand out there, so he's not going to be a stretch 3 for us in that position. Good defensive ability, not a bad steal of the ball, and some good court intelligence, which means that he'll be using the ball quite effectively as well, which is good. And he's on a really cheap deal, which is great, and we can extend him because he's on his rookie contract. So he'll probably be a bit of an easy one for us to keep in terms of we can give him minutes and he'll be very cheap for us. Next up we have Luol Deng. Yeah, that's interesting. So he looks like he's not a bad player by the ratings we've got here. He looks like he could obviously do a role for us. But where we have obviously Larry Nance Jr. and Julius Randle, whether we want to use him, I don't know. He might get some time at the 3 and 4. But we'll see. That contract is atrocious though. My goodness, $18 million in 17 and 18. Yeah, we want to try and get out of that one as quick as possible. See if we can ship him for something a bit better and a bit more manageable. Because I don't want to be paying him $18 million when he's 34. Because these stats are going to decline, and he's not going to really help us in the immediate term or in the long term, really. Thomas Robinson, another player. He's on a small deal. I can't see him getting too many minutes. He's not great. He's got the height, but he's a bit of a bit part player for us. I think I can't see him cracking the rotation or the starting lineup. So he'll probably be in and out within the season. And then we've got Ivankas Zubac. Yeah, it looks like he's got some really good defensive ability, but he's not a great rebounder for his height. He's obviously only on his rookie deal. Looks like he's tied up for 3 years, which is interesting. So he's cheap, but he's not great. So we'll see how he plays out. We've got Tariq Black as well. Again, not a great player, but oh goodness, that's not a good deal for someone who we're paying $6 million for. He looks like he's got some sort of defensive ability, but again, he's undersized for a centre. I do like to have a good sized centre on my teams. tends to be more effective that way. But again, not a great defensive rebounder. So we'll see whether we can ship him on as well. If not, we might have to just ride out his contract. And then finally, we've got Mr. Mozgov. Yeah, another not interesting contract. Obviously, for those of you familiar with the Lakers, they did have a particularly strange off season last summer. So we're going to have to bite this bullet and probably make some moves, I think, for us to turn this around fairly quickly. He's obviously a good height for a centre. He's not a bad rebounder, not a bad defender, but he's I'm not particularly happy about paying him $16 million to just stand there and defend and rebound. We'd want a bit more value for our money, I feel, with that. So that's our roster really, how we look at the moment. Obviously we've got quite a good mix in terms of positions at the moment, and looks like we will have some good options in terms of moving players around. If we take a look at the contracts just so you can see them, you can see currently we're operating a $93 million salary, which is amazing. We're still within the cap status, but we'll want to try and move some of these guys on to see if we can turn it around fairly quickly. We've got some good young players in Russell and Ingram and Randall, but we do have some lingering contracts in Mozgov and Deng and Tarek Black that we may want to try and see whether we can get something done over the next few playthroughs. The other options we sort of have here is obviously we can look into the free agent market and see whether there is anyone of any interest. If we could sort this by experience, for example, or we can have a look and see whether there's anyone who's a good sort of rating just off the bat. So it looks like anyone who's sort of above a 3, which is, I'd say, is just above average player, is Jack. But like I sort of touched on earlier, D'Angelo Russell is probably going to be our starting point guard. We can afford this season to really develop these players, so that's what we're going to do, rather than bring in some veterans to try and get an immediate sort of improvement that probably won't help us in the long term get to that championship. So the other options we've got here, obviously we've got ratings that we can look at. So the individual player ratings that are on their card, we can have a look at here and see what their overall ratings are just off the bat. We'll have stats. We'll delve more into this as we sort of play through some games, and we'll start to look to see who actually is being effective and who is not. There's obviously all kinds of things here, like I touched on earlier. But initially, we'll want to try and set this depth chart. In terms of what the the AI has set for us, we've got Russell, Clarkson, Deng, Randall, Mozgov. Ingram, interestingly, is starting on the bench. We want to change that. We want to put him straight in. Like I said, I like the idea of Lou Williams as our sixth man. I think he could be really quite effective there with that defense and his ability and his range of scoring. So that'd be fantastic to see if that'll work. And in terms of starting rotation, I'm fairly happy with what we've got here. This is the best of what we've got at the moment. We'll want to try and develop Russell and Ingram and Randall, so they're obviously definitely going to be starters. Maybe we want to move Nance up. Probably above Deng. I think, again, we might want to try and develop him because he is on such a great deal, and see if we can get better ratings out of him, better improve his game, then that'll only help us in the long term, whereas Deng is not going to improve. So once we sort of set our rotation, we can sort of look and see what type of positions we want players to play in terms of this to start off with. I'm fairly happy. I think we've got obviously Russell, Clarkson. I don't necessarily want Clarkson probably playing any point guard minutes, so we'll take him off that. Ingram, I probably want to see him playing at the 4 as well. Random, happy with just at the 4. Williams, maybe we put Williams in and playing a bit of the small forward as well. Maybe not actually. He's undersized, isn't he? He's only 6'1". Maybe that was a bad call. We'll change that back. Nance, obviously, will play at 4 and 5, and then sort of Jose Calderon will be our sort of backup point guard. Let's have a look at the sub matrix. So what's interesting about this is it sort of gives you a sort of breakdown in terms of who's going to play what minutes. So we obviously have just set up our depth chart here, so we just want the AI to just suggest this sub matrix based on what we've got. So you can see it's changed and put Ingram straight in. So we've got Russell playing 38 minutes, Clarkson playing 38 minutes, Ingram playing 24, Randall playing 38, and Mozgov playing 24 as well. So yeah, I'm happy with that. I mean, Ingram, I'm happy with just 24 minutes at the moment. We'll see whether we want to put his minutes up as we go through the season. But as a rookie, he may be a bit erratic to begin with, so we might want to bed him in a little bit as well. So we'll see how that goes. So looking at our strategy, what have we got at the moment? So it looks like in terms of strategy in sort of this game, you can break it down by how many sort of types of play you want to run. So we can look at personnel and who we want to, who we've got and where we'd be most effective. So it looks like the AI set up a bit of isolation, a bit of pick and roll, a bit of post, a bit of mixture of everything really. In terms of what I think we probably don't want to spot up as much. We probably want to run a little bit more in terms of motion, and probably a little bit more in terms of maybe we'll leave the pick and roll. Actually, we probably want to run a little bit more motion, a little bit more just general freedom, see what they can sort of do on their own. We've got obviously a very good passer at the point in terms of Russell, so let him not sort of own the ball and make a bit more decisions rather than running some set plays. Within the strategy as well, you can also give players instructions in terms of whether you want them to post up more, shoot more, and at the expense of other types of options. We won't delve too much into that now because we want to see how the players actually perform with their current sort of ratings and current play preferences. So we'll see how that goes. In terms of obviously the standings, for those of you who are familiar with the NBA, we kind of sit in the Pacific Division, and we know who's going to be top. They kind of already are top, so we're not going to be up there this year. And obviously we'll be competing with the likes of Phoenix and Sacramento to see where we get. But I think in terms of initially, we're going to want to obviously play out a few games. See how we get on, and see whether we can make any trades or two to try and improve this, because this is definitely not a championship roster at the moment. So we'll definitely want to see whether we can improve. Probably looking to build around Ingram, Russell and Randall, but we'll see how it goes. As always, feel free to put your comments in the comments box below. Any sort of feedback you may have. Any of you have played the game, be really interested to see what your thoughts are in terms of how we do. We'll just touch on, this is the scouting section, but we'll touch more on that later. But I'd be really interested to see in terms of what you think in terms of our player personnel that we have initially, and also in terms of where we think we should be assigning our scout staff points here. For the draft coming up, do we focus on sort of America or internationally? But as always, I think we'll finish up there. We'll provide just a quick summary. As always, we'll if you any comments, feed them back. If you're interested in sort of staying up to date with the channel, feel free to subscribe on the button below. And next time we'll probably start to take a look at our first game. Who have we got? So looks like we've got Portland, the Portland Pioneers, in our first opening game of the season. So we'll play that through next time and see how we get on, and see whether the likes of Ingram, Russell, and the likes of Randall can show some potential to bring us closer to a championship, or whether we'll have to just blow it all up and start again. But until next time, thanks and stay tuned.